The really phenomenal thing about transformers and these transformer-based models is that they can understand and work with code in a much deeper way than previous models.
Built this week, breaking it down. Built this week, we show you how. A fresh idea, a clever tweak. You locked in, you built this week.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Built This Week, the podcast where we share what we're building, how we're building it, and what it means for the world of AI and startups. I'm Sam Nadler, co-founder here at Rise Labs, and each and every week I'm joined by my friend, business partner, and co-host Jordan Metzner. And this week we have a special guest, the CEO of Espresso AI, Ben. We're going to jump all into Espresso AI, but first we're going to demo a little product we built with Ben in mind. This is intended to show the value of Espresso AI to your potential clients. And they go through a quick questionnaire to really see how much they're wasting by not integrating Espresso AI. So let's just go through this start small test. Let's choose where a scale up, and you'll see we'll just have some quick questions. Question number one is, how often does your team use select star in production queries? We probably do it a little often. Do you know your top 5 most expensive queries or dashboards? Not really. I have probably a handle on the top 2. How often do dashboards refresh when compared to how often they're viewed? Way more often. And are multiple teams querying the same raw data independently? Yes, definitely. And who is responsible for warehouse performance and cost? It's a shared responsibility. And as you can see, we're now getting a key observation for Espresso AI. On the top, you can see the CFO BPM is 168. Your CFO is going crazy. We're very over extracted in terms of our espresso rating. Key observations, receipt of sins, actually. We could be saving up to $8,000 a month with Espresso AI. Some key observations: queries are driving up costs, lack of visibility, refreshing dashboards significantly more often than necessary, multiple teams querying raw data. All of this can be solved when we optimize with Espresso AI. I don't know if the clapping comes through at all on the mic. This is phenomenal. This is really, really well done. Yeah, this is great. This is a super, super fun quiz. It's the sort of thing that people should be thinking about. I think pretty ironically, this is something that points to a really common set of products in the space, but the solutions are very different from what we actually do. So this starts touching on FinOps and accounting best practices and all the kind of stuff that comes to mind with really any expensive bill in a business or even at home, right? You're well, you should look at your budget. You should figure out what you're doing and why. You should figure out if you can be doing it better. Maybe we really don't need that dashboard to refresh 10 times a day if it's checked once a week. Oh, honey, we haven't watched Netflix in 6 months. We should just shut it off, right? So it's those sorts of things that go into financial discipline and FinOps best practices. In a lot of ways, this is exactly the opposite of what we actually do. So we plug into your data warehouse and we shift everything around. We're not opinionated on what you're running or why. We try to do everything in the background to make things as cheap and efficient as possible. And I think that you're paying for convenience is pretty accurate. But the flip side of that is always how much are you paying? Right? Everyone we talk to is overworked. This is a great quiz. And if this bill number is right, this is probably a team with 2 data engineers. They have way too much on their plate. And what we do is we come in and we give you a button and we're okay, well, can we get your CFO's BPM down by just cutting your bill in half without you having to think about anything and without you having to touch anything? And we kind of one of the things I say to people is yeah, you can do all this work to save money, but man, if your Snowflake bill were 50% lower, would you care or would you do other stuff? So, this is awesome. I'm very impressed that you guys put this together. Thank you.
But B, I think it's like a nice call out of like, you can go do a bunch of work to lower your bills. And to some extent, what we try to tell people is like, you can and you should do that. And at scale, you will need to. But you can also not do a bunch of work and we can lower your bills for you using AI magic.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it. I know, like, we just had a GPU cluster that stayed on, and we had some AWS overage, and it almost feels like, man, I wish I would have I wish I would have had some protection against that and put some better guardrails in place, so that wouldn't happen next time, type of thing.
Yeah. So like, the analogy there is like, we can't help you if like your ML engineers are running up their GPU clusters, but we can definitely help you if they forgot to shut them off because we could tell they're underutilized and we'll help with that. So yeah, I think it's different ways to get to the same goal, but like not doing work is usually better than doing work.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to just get like the 1 minute spiel about you and your business.
Yes, I'm Ben, one of the founders. I'm the CEO of Espresso AI. The goal of Espresso is to use machine learning to optimize compute. So we use ML models to rewrite code and make it faster. We use it to shift workloads around between different clusters to make sure things are running as efficiently as possible. We use it to make sure that you're running the right machines at the right time to get the performance that you want, but without overpaying for unused or underutilized capacity. So for the more technical folks in the audience, you can think of it like Kubernetes, but powered by ML. Today, we work specifically for Snowflake and for Databricks SQL, but we're planning to expand to other data warehouses and other compute generally in the future.
Got it. And so essentially, so if I understand this right, let's give a case of somebody on Snowflake. The reason they're able to save is that they were previously overpaying for how much like compute they need for their data warehouse. And by optimizing that through like scalable, some type of cluster system, they're able to save significantly and then just buy, and I don't know enough about it, but just buy basically on a license basis versus like on a hosted basis. Is that like how the switchover happens per se?
No, so we hook up directly to people's Snowflake accounts.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
really, everything that we're doing is stuff that our customers could do directly, but we're doing very fine grained piloting of exactly how much compute do you need at any given second. Where should this query be running versus like, instead of running all of your BI tooling on one cluster, sometimes you may be able to shift it around. And, like, I wouldn't necessarily say people are overpaying. I think it's more that like people have been trying to make computers run faster and more efficiently since we've had computers. And this is kind of a next step in that and really leveraging ML to get even more performance out of it. So yeah, like once you know how to do something better, you can look at the old way and say, oh yeah, well, this is more effective. But it's not like people are doing something wrong per se. It's just that the technology's gotten better.
Yeah, cool. Okay, now I totally get it. That's awesome. And does that serve through like through their marketplaces, or how do customers normally like integrate Espresso like on top of like whether it's Databricks or Snowflake? Like, how does the integration normally work?
Yeah, so it's not through the marketplaces. The marketplaces are designed for, I wrote an app that is going to give you maybe some dashboarding or some other features on top of some data. It's not designed for, let me rewrite and redirect all of your traffic in real time. It's definitely like a bit of an unusual use case. So we sit on the customer side of things and we basically integrate in two ways. One is we'll get an account in Snowflake or Databricks, so that lets us monitor things from kind of a bird's eye view, and it lets us make changes like in Snowflake and Databricks, what most people will call clusters, they refer to as warehouses. So it lets us say, oh, let's make this warehouse larger, let's make it smaller, let's add a little bit of capacity here because there's a spike in traffic and so on. The rest of our tooling runs over a proxy. So we actually, again, sit on the customer side before their workloads hit Snowflake or Databricks. And we can like in real time basically do like the flight traffic controller thing of like, this is going to go over here, this is going to go over there. And, you used to run this on 10 clusters, but actually if you're really granular about it, maybe you can run it on 7.
Oh, that's great. So the real-time routing of like basically queries against this data warehouse, kind of optimizing your compute to serve those queries while not having too much compute or like unused compute on the other side, which makes total sense.
Yeah.
No, this is super cool. I could see this happening on like other types of things like GPUs as well, because it seems like a
Yeah.
similar use case.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're planning to take a look at is GPU inference specifically. So any sort of large compute where like you don't know exactly how much you're going to need ahead of time, and there's a little bit of a question of how do things like fit together onto physical machines, and is there a more efficient way to pack them? All of that is probably going to benefit from the kinds of techniques that we use, which is basically really understanding that at a very detailed, granular level. I mean, yeah, GPU inference is obviously like blowing up and absolutely something where, like you have some rough ideas about how things are going to grow, but you can do a lot of statistics to get a better idea of that. You can do a lot of detailed analysis of what workloads pair together and how do they work, as well as just like, smart like CS algorithms, smart models that have a better idea of like, okay, well, you're running these two things together on the same machine. And, it doesn't quite have the resources that the two would need if they both burst at the same time, but actually they're not correlated. And so it's totally safe to run them together and occasionally spike capacity.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how kind of AI, like the LLMs, or whether that's impactful on your business or not, and kind of like, obviously, I mean, just from a coding perspective, how amazing Opus is or whatnot, or just Cloud Code, and kind of a little bit about how that's impacted kind of the way you guys build, because I think that'll be most interesting to our audience, and then they can also talk a little bit about kind of how AIs have the impact on your business.
Yeah. So I think we're a little bit so one answer is like AI massively impacts and informs our business. And we started this business because of the newer generation of models and the sorts of things that we thought they could do and that we have figured out that they in fact can do. It's a little bit off the beaten path. So I think that there's a lot of interest right now in like vibe coding and taking vibe coding to the next level. So we don't benefit as much from that. And I'll touch on that in a second. But for the actual business, like the really phenomenal thing about transformers and these transformer based models is that they can understand and work with code in a much deeper way than previous models, right? And so this is the fundamental thing that's powering things like cursor and Claude Code and Codex and so on. And you can leverage that understanding of code in different ways. So one is obviously with like autocomplete and like natural language prompts and so on. What we're doing is quite different. What we're doing is using those models to understand your workloads and how they scale, right? And how much, like, what resources they actually need. So we actually have models that will look at your queries as they come in, like read the SQL, you know, and effectively compare them to previous runs and understand, okay, there's 7 queries running in parallel on this machine now. What happens if I add an eighth one? Is it going to queue because the cluster's full? Is it going to cause us to spin up more capacity? And if so, is that good or bad? Is it going to slow down the existing queries because there's enough capacity to run it, but it's slicing into what they're doing or not? All of these things are really, really difficult unsolved problems. There's a bunch of literature on people who've tried it before. And obviously, there's like some heuristics and some understanding of cost, but it's pretty coarse compared to the kinds of results that you can get out of transformers and out of modern like LLM based models. So that is one of the things that makes our business possible. And we basically started this like 6 months or so after ChatGPT came out. So this is very much focused on the modern generation models. The day to day, like, I think we're using models like any other company is. And, they're really, really helpful for some things. A lot of our dashboarding and a lot of our like, throwaway like Panda scripts are definitely coming out of prompts from Codex. I think the flip side is like the models are definitely not good enough to do very serious back end infrastructure work. And so I'll just talk about like my own experience. Like if I'm trying to like, interface with some API I haven't read or whatever, like it's transformational, right? Like it's faster, it's more accurate. I don't need to go, look at Stack Overflow. I probably haven't visited Stack Overflow in like a year plus. But like I can't just, prompt it something and then throw that into production and expect to run like tens of millions of dollars of Snowflake workloads through it. Like it's just not that good yet. So these models are getting better every month. I'm like excited to see what happens, over 2026. But mostly we're like, you know, I'm still writing a lot of code by hand. I do hit tab a whole lot. There's a lot of good autocomplete, but yeah, I think that, yeah, like I think the full vibe coding future, there are like, 25 Claude code agents running in the background for serious backend infra. Like we're just not there yet.
Yeah, totally agree. But it still seems like even though we are not there, and it maybe we'll like never get there, but it's just makes like someone who's not an engineer better than never being an engineer, and someone who is like a great engineer, a better, like everybody gets the superpower, right? So even for the best
Yeah.
engineers, they're still getting this superpower where, even yes, I agree with you. It's not like, go build this whole thing and like put it into production, but like even they get that advantage. And even as you said, like whether it's autocomplete or whether it's like, hey, go do this. Like I have, one of our backend engineers hates front end tasks, and like now he can just get those done really quickly. So they get out of his task, out of his way, rather than like codependent on somebody else, for example, previously or something.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely very true. And like, I would say everyone is probably 10, 20, 30% more productive, which is huge, right? Like, we pay a lot less for cloud code than like a third of an engineer per engineer. So that's a really substantial change. And then like we don't have a dedicated front end engineer. That just those tasks tend to just go into our on-call rotation because it's easy enough. We don't have a massive front end. It's just some dashboarding for our end users, so it's also relatively simple. But yeah, like we just kind of rely on the robot to do some of that stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We outsource. The design is a little bit more of a bottleneck because we have some customers where we're saving them millions of dollars and they're, paying a good amount. And I think they want something that looks a little bit better than like we don't have a designer on staff. So interestingly, like that's, I think like design might get more humanized as like its complement, like the actual front end engineering gets easier.
Yeah, super cool. Okay, well, I think we talked a lot about Espresso. We got two news stories, so let's jump into it. But I think the first one is, Apple signed the deal with Google, and obviously, now Gemini is going to be powering Siri, and obviously probably powering Android as well through Google. But yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about Gemini, Apple, Android, maybe even a little bit too. But yeah, just and obviously, I mean, we use all the models here internally as well. But I think we've seen, some things where Gemini's perform well, and other places it obviously hasn't been a top tier model yet compared to some of the other models on the market. Love to hear your thoughts there.
I think so. I have opinions on this. I used to work on natural language processing at Google, and a lot of the folks that I work with, well, it's been a few years, but some of those folks and the code that I used to work with transformed into Gemini eventually. And like, I'm very, very excited to see this. I think Siri is one of the voice assistants with a lot of mindshare and a lot of, like lots of usage, like lots of people use it, but realistically doesn't seem to be something that's gotten substantially better over the last few years. So like, I don't have so much of an opinion on like, should they have gone with Gemini? Should they have gone with Anthropic? I think, or, OpenAI. I think all of these models are keeping pace with each other. And, any given month, like one might be a little bit ahead. But like, I think the upgrade from Siri to Gemini is super, super exciting. If they really leverage it, I think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff. And I also have a little bit of inside baseball, which is all of this is public. Like a lot of the folks from that part of Google moved over to Apple. So I kind of assume that their drive of, yeah, we can do things internally and try to catch up and maybe on that, but we can also just sign this partnership, which like I think is gonna be great for Apple users and talking on AirPods into a MacBook. So like I will probably benefit from this as well.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's obvious that, like, things like speech to text on an iPhone is pretty poor. And I mean, almost every LLM app has a much better, speech to
Yeah.
text model and transcription and diaration. And it's unfortunate. And like Siri's not smart at all or hasn't been historically. I think almost the same thing happened with, Amazon and Alexa, right? Like, they just kind of
Yeah.
like lost market shares. They weren't able to keep up with, AI at the edge, right?
Yeah, for sure. I would, maybe politely phrase that as well as really great at shipping hardware. So excited to see like, yeah, I think it'll just be awesome to have like a smarter voice assistant like actually work in your headphones and your phone and all that.
With a friend about something. We said like, okay, well, we'll see what happens in a year. And I told Siri to like remind me in a year, but she couldn't really like do that well, like within our text message chain, So, yeah, I think, those things with well integration, like into the Apple ecosystem, obviously will just, create for a much more, enjoyable experience on probably all Apple devices, but definitely an iPhone. Okay, cool. Let's jump into the other story, which I think is like pretty interesting, which is about Facebook's announcement about this megawatt capacity. And I think, I've been saying for a while, it seems obvious that they should kind of do the AWS thing and like offer some of their GPUs as a service. I think what's like most interesting about this is the way they finance this thing, because it shows like an ability for Facebook to kind of scale these things without having to leverage their balance sheet, and that obviously can provide for even more scale. But yeah, obviously, we've seen the mega salaries they've done, we've seen the Scale AI acquisition, etc. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about Facebook and building their own kind of mega compute, and whether they make it available or not still is not clear yet, but seems like it will be.
Yeah, it is. It would be interesting to have another hyperscaler competing. I think that like Google has really phenomenal technology in a way, like sales is really like a core part of that. And being late to the race is really difficult, which is definitely something that GCP learned. Maybe like really focusing on GPUs is a way to get into the market now. Like CoreWeave IPO'd recently. So there's definitely more room there. Generally, so in this article, the person leading up part of this effort is Daniel Gross, who's an investor of ours and was part of the big like Meta acquisition. And interestingly, like the way that connected with him is in summer of 2023, his fund announced the Andromeda cluster, which was a small purchase of $100 million in GPUs to make available to their portfolio companies. And there was like at the time there's just like no GPU quota anywhere. Like it was if you were not committing to millions of dollars in spend, which as a startup we definitely couldn't. You just like we ended up like buying GPUs off Amazon basically and like just running them in our office. So like I think that this is like an awesome project that is totally up his alley and something that he has a lot of experience in. So like really excited to see where it goes. The overall like should like yeah, like the meta huge salaries thing is kind of like Mark Zuckerberg seems to take really big bets and some of them play out and some of them don't. I think that given how important ML is, like it's not crazy. I probably no one would have done it, like no one else would have maybe done it exactly in this way. But the idea of like, we have all this money. How do we give ourselves a shot at being at the leader in the AI race, especially when, they're not OpenAI and they're not Google and maybe haven't been doing quite that much research into LLM specifically is like, it's fun to watch, and I like it's interesting to see what comes out of there. I'd also be like excited to have like more GPU availability and like hopefully cheaper and better availability. But honestly, I kind of suspect they'll step it all up internally. The flip side is maybe like if they haven't gone onto the market as a cloud provider, like why would they do it now? But who knows? Like Zuck could wake up one day and decide that's what they're doing, and then that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with many of your points. I mean, I think it seems like historically to date that, ads or, AI and ads are AI is one of the best use case, or ads are one of the best use case for AI, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, obviously, I mean, a business built on advertising, like Facebook and Google both, obviously perform well using AI. Yeah, we'll see as, NVIDIA brings on, TPUs with its Grok acquisition and the impact on, all these types of chips at the inference level. And to your point, like, yeah, Zuck is willing to take a lot of risk and make some bets. And, it'll be exciting to see what happens there.
All right, Jordan. Thanks, Ben. This was a great episode. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button for Built This Week. And if you get some time, please check out Espresso AI.
Yeah, this is really fun. Thank you guys. Sam, that was awesome. Like, that was a really fun demo. Thanks for putting that together. If you're interested in cutting a bunch on your Snowflake bill or your Databricks SQL bill, come visit our website. It's espresso.ai, or you can just email me. I'm Ben at espresso.ai. Happy to talk to you about, you know, if you're stressed about your Snowflake bill, we can probably help either directly or just happy to chat about best practices.
Thanks so much. Have a great one. Bye, Ben.
Built this week.